Yeah, so welcome everybody. Hello. This is essentially a report of the science team, which Lena Noack and I co-organized since nearly a year. So what we will do in the science team update, essentially, we do a short introduction of what the role of the science team is within the overall collaboration structure. And we essentially give a short overview of the recent activities that we did and the plans that we have for the upcoming time. All right. So first of all, what is the science team's role and what are the activities that we usually do? First of all, I think the most frequent activity of us is that we organize monthly meetings, virtual online meetings that happen about once a month. We haven't had one of these meetings since about 2 or 3 months, I think, since the summer break, essentially, mostly because we had the in-person science team meeting last month. So the goal of these monthly meetings is essentially to stimulate and to some extent organize subgroup work on ultimately projects that hopefully individually lead to publications that support essentially the development of the technology instrument, the work of the instrumentation and technology teams in defining the life mission. So the goal of these projects in the midterm is that by asking the question, what type of physical or chemical effect would we measure or want to understand about terrestrial type exoplanets with a lifelike mission, what type of mission design actually do we need to answer these questions? So additionally to that, so what we do is we help recruiting additional members and we do an onboarding within the science team and to try to, for every new members, to guide them to the right teams or sub-teams that are implementing science projects that are aligned with the science of the individual team members. I think Sasha mentioned it earlier before. This picture that you see is from end of September, where we had the first science team in-person meeting in Berlin and at the Free University of Berlin, hosted by Lena, which I think was very fruitful and quite a heated discussion actually about some of the main directions that the science team will take in the next few months and potentially also years. So you've seen this slide in an alternating way. So the goal of this in the midterm will be essentially of the activities that we do is to sort of engage. Part of this is to engage the community and build a European community around scientific implementation of the LIFE mission. And we have heard already about now 3 of these papers. There are many more. And so parts of this also will be that we refresh the memory of incoming new members, what has already been implemented in publication form and what is still to be done, essentially, to better define the scientific goals and the technical instrumentation implementation of the mission. So Daniel mentioned this earlier. So this is just for essentially the recording and the and later on, if you're interested in science team activities, so we have an interface to the market of projects, essentially through a more which we find useful for the monthly science meetings, sort of a Google update sheet that interfaces with the market of project, a Google Drive folder, where we essentially go through the current projects and share updates once per month. So if you are interested in becoming sort of join one of the science team projects or implement your own projects, then the monthly virtual meetings are a good place to start. And this link will lead you there, so you can either take a photograph or use this link. So a little bit more, we will discuss a little bit now about what the in-person meeting essentially was about. So there were 2 main goals. The first one was to restructure the science team projects. This would include an analysis and reevaluation of current projects, specifically with the goal to turn around some of the projects and sort of bring upcoming and new projects in the right direction. The important aspect here is that, as Sasha mentioned earlier, we have a very strong sort of current structure that is guided by individual members of the community, and that what we need is specifically is that the processes inform the life architecture. So the goal of the science project, science team projects, is essentially not the question, can hypothetical life mission measure my process X or Y, but it needs to be the other way around. What type of life mission do we need in order to constrain statistically process X or Y with the mission? So this includes also a definition of core or new science projects that we deem as a community very informative and central to develop the life architecture. And this also includes the definition for the science team roadmap for the upcoming 1 or 2 years. And the second major goal, so we will, about this first part, we will hear more tomorrow. There's 45 minutes that we have to also discuss this as a community and as part of this all hands meeting. And the second part is to enhance the collaboration with the instrument team. Specifically, as preparation for the life concept study, apologies, not for mission study, for the concept study that was mentioned earlier, what we believe, and that has been a goal for quite some time, is to essentially enhance a tighter connection, or make a tighter connection between the instrument technology team and the science team possible. And part of that was implemented at the in-person meeting, and this leads me to the next slide. Thanks to Felix Dannert and Philipp Huber, who put a lot of work in the past few weeks essentially in the preparation for the in-person meeting, in creating a sort of a Python, a Jupyter notebook, a Google Colab file, essentially, that makes very clear for everyone, that is very clear for everyone to be able to start to use the live simulator. So we found that in multiple previous studies, there was a recurring theme that there was some sort of entrance threshold for using the live simulator that made it hard, for instance, for student projects, also for PhD projects, to essentially implement live projects. So thanks to Felix and Philip, there's now a YouTube video on that you can also find on the live website, and an associated Google Colab file that you can just copy and essentially follow a very easy tutorial that guides you through the first steps. So I want to thank you, those two again, and we may also hear and talk about this more tomorrow. And I think that leads over to Lena's part of the talk.
Yeah, something else that we have been doing quite a lot during this first life science team meeting in Berlin was to have brainstorming sessions with all the different participants. So here you can see actually a snapshot of our hybrid brainstorming sessions that we did together with several of you that joined online, and of course people and participants. Tim asked me to point out that I actually chose a picture and not him, but I found it really nice to show the interactions that we had. It was really heated discussions, as Tim already mentioned. And you can also see Andrea, who also was incremented for steering the discussions together with the other people that have been there in Berlin. And what we have been doing was to discuss different aspects. On the one hand, on this concept study that was now already mentioned by Tim and before by Sasha, but also what kind of projects do we actually want to focus in more detail in the next year on. And we organized world cafes, so we're having like different places where we were organizing or where we were discussing specific points with subgroups that was then mixing, and therefore we actually got different aspects on main questions that we were asking. And Tim, if you can go to the next slide. So the first day we had a World Cafe or such brainstorming session where we were discussing more about this concept study. So what is the main objectives that the life mission actually wants to address? We can phrase it as that life shore determines the occurrence rate of life as we know it on nearby exoplanets. We have discussed actually quite a lot how we should phrase it, if we should use more careful phrasing, more detailed phrases, if we should promise, if we should be really bold and promise more, or be rather conservative in the mission objectives that we think that life really needs to fulfill. But I think these kind of this phrase that you can see here describes quite well what we want to achieve as life. So this is why we are engaging in life, why we are spending so much time on making life happen. But to actually reach such a mission objective, what actually does life need to do to actually get to this point that we can determine the occurrence rate of life? And for this, we started to discuss what specific measurements do we actually need with life. So LifeShore provide data that allows us to measure something in a specific accuracy with a specific error bar with respect to habitability, so asking for habitable planets, or specifically biosignatures. What would we need to measure? What does life need to measure for us to be able to say we detected a biosignature? However, to be able to do this, to actually fill in these numbers, we also had on the second day another World Café where we had brainstorming sessions, trying to find out what do we actually need to define as science requirements to be able to reach the main objective, and also what kind of projects do we need to be able to define these values. But life, within life, we also will have other additional objectives that we will cover. So next to this main mission objective that was mentioned on the previous slide, what other objectives are crucial for life and what kind of requirements would we actually need for that? And on the other hand, something that Oscar also addressed already in his talk, we want to show what are the things that makes life unique. So why do we actually need life in addition, together with other missions like HWO? So what are the core, or what are potential core projects that we could actually define that show us the unique abilities that only life can actually give us? So also for these new projects that came out of the discussion, we will show them to you tomorrow together with an overview of what kind of projects we currently have already in the science team. And so we can discuss also tomorrow a little bit more about these kind of new projects that we have been thinking about. So how do we continue now in the next years? So in addition to, of course, the projects that actually is the main task of the science team. One thing that has been discussed a couple of times actually already throughout the last years is to have a potentially start a live lecture series, which is also something that might be useful for onboarding of new members that may be joining today or at the next all hands meeting and wondering what is nulling actually, what does it mean, what is the basic knowledge that I need to know to understand the concept of life and what makes life so special. And we had started to compile already a list of topics where we could have such really basic introductory level lectures that we would then also make available, of course, on the live website. And what you can see is one of us actually a training session for the live simulator. And thanks to Philip and Felix, we actually have this already. So in a way, we have now the first lecture series that we could actually start from to now delve into a live lecture series. And if you would be interested to volunteer to give one of these lectures or have any other ideas what we should actually cover, then please contact us, reach out to us.
Okay, and I know that we have to finish up, Andrea, so I will very quickly, we'll be very quick with the last few points. So one of these major things that was already mentioned also in the discussion today is that we need to sort of implement a more coherent community initiative across all member states. We believe that one of the major things there is that it's important at upcoming major conferences that life is represented, and this is what we organize in the background, so that that sort of like if there's a major conferences, there are many of them throughout the year, that we have a sufficient concentration of people to organize splinter events at these meetings. That includes, for instance, that we have always a contribution either in the poster or talk form, but potentially also as handout flyers that we are able to, that we hand out to other members. What we will also do in the next year is to more regularly follow up meetings for ongoing projects, to streamline the projects in the right direction, and then basically implement a more focused approach to finish ongoing projects and have a more coherent view of how the projects are structured and lead and potentially feed into the concept study. And we are, of course, always open to new suggestions. And for that specifically, we encourage you to attend the monthly online meetings. Thank you so much for your attention.